Elliot Rodgers' story begins in the bustling city of London, England, where he was born on July 24th into a life of privilege and opportunity. His father, Peter Rodger, was a well-known British filmmaker, and his mother, Lee Chin, a nurse who worked on film sets. The pair met through their work in the entertainment industry, and their shared creative ambitions seemed to promise a bright future for their family. Not long after their marriage, they welcomed Elliot into the world, followed by a younger sister named Georgia 2 years later. At age 5, Elliot's family moved from London to Los Angeles, California, where his father sought to further his career in Hollywood. It was a move that marked the beginning of a new chapter. For a time, Elliot's life seemed idyllic. He was enrolled in Topanga Elementary School, where he was described as a well-behaved child. He made a few friends, and outwardly, his childhood seemed bright. However, beneath the surface, Elliot's natural shyness and social awkwardness created barriers that would grow over time. Elliot's seemingly stable childhood took its first major hit when his parents divorced just after his 7th birthday. This upheaval fractured his sense of security and forced him and his sister to alternate between their parents' homes. While his father's career continued to thrive, Elliot struggled to adjust to his changing family dynamics. A few months after the divorce, Peter introduced Elliot to Sumaya Akabun, a new woman who would soon become his stepmother. Elliot's relationship with Sumaya was fraught from the start. He viewed her as an outsider and refused to accept discipline or guidance from her. Their arguments became a recurring source of tension in the household, further eroding Elliot's fragile sense of belonging. Although his father's financial success ensured that Elliot lived a life of material comfort, complete with vacations, the latest gadgets, and access to health care, these luxuries did little to ease the growing void of emotional disconnection in his life. As Elliot progressed through elementary school and into his teenage years, his social struggles became more pronounced. Despite his efforts to fit in with the cool kids, his natural introversion and lack of confidence made him an easy target for bullies. Over time, his circle of friends dwindled, leaving him increasingly isolated. Elliot's struggles with bullying were not limited to verbal taunts. At one point, classmates taped his head to a desk, a traumatic experience that left lasting scars on his psyche. The bullying and rejection he faced at school were compounded by his difficulties at home. The arrival of a new half-brother, Jazz, from his father's second marriage, added another layer of complexity to his family dynamics. By the time he was 13, Elliot was grappling with feelings of invisibility and inadequacy, both at school and within his family. As his teenage years progressed, Elliot began to retreat further into himself. His loneliness and frustration found an outlet in the digital world. He created a YouTube channel, Elliot's Blog, where he documented his feelings of isolation and his longing for a simpler, happier childhood. These early videos reveal a young man struggling to make sense of his emotions and the world around him. At the age of 16, Elliot began seeing a psychiatrist. He was prescribed risperidone, an antipsychotic medication commonly used to treat conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. However, Elliot openly admitted in his blog that he refused to take the medication, believing it would not help him. Instead, he continued to spiral into depression, his thoughts increasingly consumed by resentment and anger. By the time Elliot turned 18, his frustrations had coalesced into a toxic worldview. He became fixated on his lack of romantic and sexual experiences, viewing these as personal failures and injustices inflicted upon him by society. His resentment was particularly directed at women, whom he believed were deliberately denying him the affection and attention he felt he deserved. Elliot's entitlement was evident in his attempts to transform his life superficially. He learned to drive, purchased a BMW, and revamped his wardrobe, believing that these changes would make him more appealing to others. Yet he made little effort to actually engage with people. Instead, he spent his lunch breaks sitting alone in his car, waiting for others to approach him. His evenings were often spent in isolation, playing video games like World of Warcraft and Halo with a few online friends. His toxic mindset began to manifest in hostile actions. On one occasion, he threw hot coffee at a couple he saw kissing in a Starbucks parking lot. These acts of aggression were fueled by a deep sense of envy and rage toward those who seemed to effortlessly achieve the happiness and connection he craved. In 2011, Elliot moved to Isla Vista, a college town near Santa Barbara, California, to attend Santa Barbara City College. He hoped the change of environment would mark a fresh start, but his struggles only deepened. He quickly clashed with his roommates, driven by his racist beliefs and inability to compromise. His social isolation persisted, and he found himself unable to form meaningful connections. Elliot's bitterness toward women intensified during this time. He expressed his anger in online forums and through his YouTube videos, railing against what he perceived as an unfair society that favored others over him. His delusions of entitlement and superiority grew more pronounced, setting the stage for the dark path he would eventually take. By 2012, Elliot's thoughts had turned increasingly violent. He visited a firing range and took his first steps toward enacting what he would later call his day of retribution. During this visit, he described feeling a sense of clarity about his intentions. He purchased his first firearm, a Glock 34 pistol, in December of that year, followed by a Sig Sauer P226 the following spring. Elliot's writings and video diaries during this period reveal the depth of his delusion. He described himself as a supreme gentleman and a god, destined to punish humanity for denying him the life he believed he was owed. His manifesto detailed meticulous plans for a violent rampage, underscoring the chilling resolve with which he approached his twisted mission. By 2013, Elliot Rodger's life was consumed by anger, jealousy, and delusions of grandeur. His loneliness had hardened into a deep resentment for those he believed had wronged him. Women who ignored him, men who succeeded where he had failed, and a society that did not recognize his self-proclaimed superiority. This toxic mindset was captured in a manifesto he began to write during this time, a chilling document that would later serve as a roadmap for his planned day of retribution. Elliot meticulously outlined his grievances and fantasies of revenge, referring to himself as a magnificent figure destined to purify the world. He expressed a desire to punish women for denying him affection and to eradicate those he viewed as inferior. His writings alternated between self-pity and megalomania, painting a picture of a young man consumed by a warped sense of entitlement and hatred. Despite his growing bitterness, Elliot continued to make half-hearted attempts to integrate into social life. He attended a party in Isla Vista in July 2013, hoping to connect with others and gain the validation he so desperately craved. To prepare, he had spent 2 weeks working out at home, convinced that physical fitness would make him more appealing. However, his efforts were met with rejection. At the party, Elliot's awkwardness and inability to engage with others led to yet another humiliating experience. After an argument escalated, he attempted to push women off a 10-foot ledge, only to be overpowered and thrown off the ledge himself. The fall resulted in a broken leg, requiring surgery and a long recovery. This incident became a turning point for Elliot, solidifying his resolve to enact his violent plans. In his manifesto, he described the event as a moment of ultimate rejection, one that deepened his hatred for the world. In the months following the party, Elliot began to carefully plan his attack. He purchased additional firearms and stockpiled ammunition, while continuing to refine the details of his manifesto. His plan was methodical and chillingly specific. He envisioned a 2-day spree that would begin with the murder of his stepmother and younger brother, whom he saw as obstacles to his legacy. Next, he planned to lure strangers to his apartment and kill them before targeting a sorority house at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Elliot viewed the sorority as a symbol of the women who had rejected him and believed that attacking its members would serve as the ultimate act of vengeance. Finally, he intended to use his car to mow down pedestrians in Isla Vista before taking his own life. Elliot's manifesto revealed not only the depth of his hatred, but also his growing delusions of grandeur. He referred to himself as a god and envisioned his attack as a righteous act of retribution. His writings were a disturbing mix of self-aggrandizement and nihilism, underscoring the dangerous combination of entitlement and despair that drove him. In April 2014, just weeks before his planned attack, Elliot uploaded several disturbing videos to his YouTube channel. In these recordings, he ranted about his loneliness, his hatred for women, and his desire for revenge. The content alarmed a viewer, who reported him to local authorities. Police officers visited Elliot's apartment to conduct a welfare check. During the interview, Elliot managed to convince them that he was not a threat, portraying himself as a polite and cooperative young man. The officers left without conducting a search of his apartment, a decision that would later prove tragic. Had they entered his room, they would have discovered his stockpile of weapons and ammunition, as well as a copy of his manifesto. This encounter left Elliot shaken, but resolute. In his manifesto, he wrote about how close he had come to being discovered and how relieved he was that the officers had not looked further. The near miss only strengthened his determination to carry out his plans. In the weeks leading up to May 23, 2014, Elliot's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He spent his days wandering around Isla Vista, recording videos in which he detailed his grievances and plans for revenge. These recordings, later uploaded to YouTube, provide a haunting glimpse into his state of mind. In one video, Elliot lamented the sight of couples enjoying the beach, expressing his anger and envy. In another, he declared himself superior to others, claiming that he was entitled to the love and attention that had been denied to him. His tone was a mix of despair and defiance, reflecting the internal conflict that fueled his actions. On May 22, 2014, Elliot uploaded a final video titled Elliot Rogers' Retribution. In it, he announced his plans for the following day, describing the attack as his ultimate act of vengeance. He blamed women for his misery, criticized society for failing to recognize his greatness, and declared that he would punish the world for his perceived injustices. On the evening of May 23rd, Elliot began his attack. He first targeted his roommates, George Chen, Chung Yuan Hong, and Weihan Wang, killing them in his apartment. The three young men, who had no role in Elliot's grievances, were brutally stabbed to death. Elliot then drove to the Alpha Phi sorority house, intending to carry out a mass shooting. When no one answered the door, he turned his attention to nearby pedestrians, opening fire and killing two young women, Katie Cooper and Veronica Weiss. He continued his rampage through Isla Vista, shooting and injuring several others, and using his car to strike pedestrians. His final victim was Christopher Michael Martinez, a student at UCSB who was shot and killed outside a deli. Elliot eventually engaged in a shootout with police before crashing his car. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, bringing his rampage to a close. The tragedy left 6 victims dead and 14 others injured, along with countless lives forever changed. The community of Isla Vista mourned the loss of innocent lives, holding vigils and memorial services to honor the victims. Elliot's parents, devastated by their son's actions, publicly expressed their sorrow and condemnation of the attack. Elliot Rogers' actions and manifesto brought attention to the toxic subculture of incels, or involuntary celibates, an online community that promotes misogyny and entitlement. While his attack was universally condemned, some members of this community hailed him as a hero, a disturbing reflection of the ideology that had fueled his actions. This case serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of untreated mental illness, unchecked entitlement, and the dangers of online echo chambers. The lives lost on May 23, 2014, stand as a heartbreaking testament to the need for greater awareness and intervention in addressing these issues. Thank you for joining us as we explored the disturbing case of Elliot Rogers. If you found this story compelling and believe in the importance of shedding light on these tragedies, please consider subscribing to stay informed on similar stories. Together, we can learn from the past and work toward preventing such senseless acts in the future.